Okay, so for EOL number 7, I read two articles that were required. So first one I'm going to talk about is a step-by-step guide to Tier 2 behavioral progress monitoring. So I feel pretty confident about this topic just from getting experience with the FBA and BIP process that we were doing. So positive behavioral interventions and supports is a 3-tiered framework for preventing problem behavior and intervening for students at risk for or with behavior problems. So Tier 1 is a school-wide and system-based approach to defining and teaching behavioral expectations. It's recognizing pro-social behavior and correcting problem behavior. Tier 1 programs and practices have resulted in higher academic achievement and fewer discipline problems. So altogether, it's just going to improve the school climate because when people are following the rules and understand the expectations, there's less room for error. So then Tier 2 is targeted supports are provided to students at risk with low-level problem behavior by matching efficient research or evidence-based interventions. So this would just mean just intervening in ways that are effective. As we learned in most of our classes, timeouts aren't that effective, so I don't really think this would be what they were talking about. So the Tier 2 interventions can be delivered in a small group or individually. Research, and we learned about this in Perry and Bates' class a little bit too, now that I think about it. So research indicates that that many students have improved their behavior. For instance, this could be on-task disruption and appropriate language significantly by participating in Tier 2 interventions, such as check-ins and check-outs, self-management strategies. This could be teaching a student to calm down, and social skills instructional groups. So Tier 3 is reserved for students with persistent and resistant challenging behaviors. So this is, to my understanding, like the student, for instance, Elliot James, are doing in the case study, and involves intensive and individualized function-based behavioral interventions. Function-based interventions have demonstrated effectiveness for a range of students across the grade span, both general and special education settings. All tiers collect data and generally involve a team that consists of an administrator, a range of teachers from different content areas, and then school counselors, psychologists, and behavior specialists, and social workers. This didn't exactly state parents too, but I would assume so because in our process that we're doing right now, parents are involved. So in Tier 1, I'm kind of implementation fidelity is like, oh, we kind of already talked about this. So sorry, the first step is to select an appropriate method of measurement in this process. So after a student has been matched to Tier 2 interventions, the first step is for the Tier 2 team to collect and select an appropriate method of measurement. So this could be data or frequency, duration data or frequency data, whatever you think best fits. Obviously, it's research-based, so you're going to match the form of collection with what needs to be done. So step 2, plan for data collection and evaluation. After the method of measurement has been selected based on what is practical and appropriate given the intervention and available resources, the Tier 2 team has decisions to make. First, they make logistical plans associated with data collection. Then they need to make plans for how they will evaluate student progress. So then we're going to collect and analyze data. And this is important too because obviously you need to see if it's working or not. And then consider treatment fidelity. So as the team continues to monitor progress, compares baseline data with intervention data, and determines whether or not student is not responding to intervention, treatment fidelity must be a part of the discussion. Treatment fidelity is a term used to indicate to the extent to which the intervention is in place as originally intended. So how is it working, etc. Then step 5, adjust based on responsiveness, which makes sense. So if after we study an intervention and how we wanted it to work, if it's not working, we're going to need to adjust several things. So then the second article is strengthening progress monitoring procedures for individual student behavior support. So step 1 is develop fidelity measures. So specific research or evidence-based strategies for staff to implement that will positively impact student behavior. However, the effectiveness of BSP is impacted by the fidelity which the strategies are implemented. Without explicit attention to fidelity, BSP implementation is going to be inconsistent at best. So step 2 is develop outcome measures. Once team members have determined fidelity measures that will allow for monitoring of implementation, they can then explore how they will assess to the extent in which the plan is impacting student behavior. Outcome measures indicate the effectiveness, increasing pro-social behaviors and alternative replacement behaviors, and decreasing behaviors that are understood to be negatively impact the student social and academic success. When identifying outcome measures, the team should consider answering the following questions. What target behavior do we want to increase? What target behavior do we want to decrease? What are the desired long-term and short-term goals? So as we know, we've talked about this once again in the BIP and FBA. And then step 3 is develop an action plan. The action plan should bring together components of the behavior support program, including each fidelity and outcome measure identified for progress monitoring. Action planning discussions focus on who will be involved in implementation, what they will need to do, and how they can efficiently embed data collection into daily routines. Step 4, we need to establish decision-making routines. So some questions we're going to ask when doing this is, what are the schedules and the routines for student support team meetings? Who will monitor and communicate summaries of fidelity and outcome data to the support team, and how often? Which data and what format will indicate progress or error patterns, and what data indicators for continuing, modifying, adding, and funding a fading plan component. So then, so that's pretty much EOL number 11. It summarizes the behavior plan. So this, in my opinion, relates to phase 2 and 3 of what we've already done. And I found this really educational, which is why I emailed you to see if you have the sources saved so I can go back to this when I'm an actual teacher someday.